He didn't say it because he wanted her. He said it because the Calverts were watching. And Emmerich Halvain never let another family think anything of his could be taken. Weeks before a marriage that would fold two empires into one, he put his hand on the back of her chair and told the room of 200 people that she belonged to him until morning. She didn't flinch. She reached into her coat. What she handed him did not just end the engagement. It ended the man he had spent 30 years building. The ice sculpture had begun to sweat. Emmerich watched a bead of water track down the carved flank of it, a swan or a heron. Something the caterers had insisted was traditional. He had signed the invoice without reading past the first line. He signed everything that way now, which was the entire problem, though he would not understand that for another 2 hours. The banquet hall of the old customs house was full of people who wanted him dead and were smiling about it. Rain moved across the tall arched windows in slow diagonal sheets, blurring the rail yards below, and the sealed cold houses that held 4 decades of his family's money in refrigerated crates. He knew exactly how many men were standing down there in the dark with rifles under their coats, and the number was not comforting. "You're doing the thing with your jaw," Oriane said. She stood at his left, close enough that the room would read them as intimate, far enough that neither of them had to feel the other breathe. Her gown was the color of wet slate. Her hair was pinned back so severely it pulled at the corners of her eyes, and she wore her mother's rings on the wrong fingers, which Emmerich had noticed the first time they met and had never mentioned, because mentioning it would have been a kind of intimacy and they had both been careful to avoid those. "What thing, you grind. People can see it. It makes you look like you're being marched somewhere." She lifted a glass from a passing tray without looking at the boy carrying it. "Which you are, but they don't need to watch it happen. Your father is here. My father is always here." She sipped. He came early to walk the cold houses. He wanted to see the compressors. Emmerich turned his head very slightly. He wanted to see the compressors. Let him touch it, her mouth curved, without any warmth, arriving near it. "In 11 weeks half of it is his. Anyway, you signed that part, you did read that part." He had read it 4 times, in a room with 3 lawyers and a bottle of something amber that nobody drank, and it had felt like the shrewdest hour of his life. The Halvaness had the sidings, the bonded warehouses, the men who could move a sealed crate across a border without anyone writing it down. The Calverts had banks. Marry the banks. It was arithmetic. It was not a betrayal, because there had been nothing there to betray. "Where is Fen?" "Somewhere, with a phone in his hand, like always." She said it fondly. Everyone said it fondly. Osric Fen had been his father's second, and then his second, a wide, warm, heavy-shouldered man who was related to nobody in the house and whom everybody in it called Uncle, and who had taught Emmerich to tie a tie in a hospital corridor on the night his mother died. "He's been out on the terrace 3 times since the soup. I pay him too much." "Then he should be indoors." A quartet played something with too many notes in it. Under the music he could hear the rain, and beneath the rain the industrial thud of the compressors in Cold House 4, running all night the way they always did. Keep it cold. Keep it moving. Do not let anything thaw. He looked, without deciding to, toward the service corridor at the far end of the hall. There was a narrow door there, propped open a hand's width, and in the strip of dimmer light behind it, a woman stood with a clipboard against her forearm, counting bottles as they came up from the cellar. She wore a plain, dark coat over plainer clothes. She had not changed for the banquet, because she had not been invited to the banquet, because in 11 years, nobody had ever thought to invite Anka Sorrel anywhere. She kept the ledgers. There was a room below the weighbridge, low and concrete, with a steel door and a dehumidifier, and in that room were the books. Not the clean books, the other ones. Every crate, every payment, every name of every inspector who had looked at a manifest and then looked away, written by hand in a script so small and even. It looked printed in volumes she ordered from a bindery in another country, because she did not trust anything that could be edited without leaving a wound. Emmerich's father had hired her, Emmerich had inherited her the way he had inherited the desk and the scar on the doorframe of the study, which is to say, without thinking about it at all. She had never once been late. She had never once been wrong. 2 winters ago, a man had come down the Weybridge stairs with a crowbar and a plan, and Anka had put the current volume in the floor safe, closed it, and stood in front of it with her hands folded, and told him in the tone of a woman explaining a parking restriction that he was welcome to try, but she would be extremely inconvenienced. Emmerich had heard the story secondhand. He had laughed. He had not gone down to see her. He remembered that now, watching her count bottles, and something moved in his chest that he did not have a name for and did not want one. She had been absent for 3 nights the week before last. The thought arrived flat and unwelcome. 3 nights, the ledger room dark. And when he finally asked her about it on the Thursday, she had said there had been a problem with the bindery shipment, and she had gone to collect it herself, and he had said, fine, and she had said fine, and that was the end of it. Except that she had been holding her left hand strangely against her side, and there had been a split across 2 of her knuckles, scabbed and shining, and when he asked, she had looked at the wall behind him and said, the latch on the cellar door. He had accepted it. It had been a Thursday, and he had a fitting at 4, Emmerich, Oriane's voice, sharpened. My father is coming over. Put your face on. My face is on. Then put a better one on. Reynard Calvert crossed the room the way weather crosses a field, 70, silver at the temples, one hand permanently in a pocket, moving like a younger man who had been told he was 70 and had decided to be gracious about it. Behind him came 2 of his people, and behind them, at a distance, meant to look accidental, came Osric Fenn, tucking his phone into his coat, his broad face already assembling itself into pleasure at seeing everyone. Emmerich. Reynard took his hand in both of his. His palms were dry and very warm. Your compressors are magnificent. I've never seen a run of cold houses kept that tight. My father built them. Your father built them, and you kept them. Renard looked around the hall, at the sweating Swan, at 200 people eating his future son-in-law's food. This is a good night. I want you to know, I think it's a good night. 11 weeks, and then no more of this. He gestured at all of it, the smiling, the standing, and the wet stone of the whole enterprise. Then it's just work. I like work. Osric laughed his warm laugh, and said that nobody had ever accused Reynard Calvert of enjoying a party. And the men around them laughed, and Emmerich laughed, and it all sounded correct. He did not notice that Osric's eyes went, for exactly 1 second, to the propped door at the end of the service corridor, and then away. It started, as these things always start, with a clipboard. The bottles were wrong. Emmerich heard the edge of it before he heard the words, that particular register a room drops into when something is about to become other people's entertainment, and he turned to see one of Reynard's men standing in the mouth of the service corridor with his hand flat on the doorframe, blocking it, and Anka standing in front of him with her clipboard, against her forearm, not backing up. I'm telling you the count is short, the man said. He was young and expensive, the kind of young that has never yet been hit by anything. 8 cases came up. Your paper says 10. My paper says 10, because 10 came up. Anka said, 2 of them went out the side door with a man in a green apron 19 minutes ago. I've written his name down, you're welcome to have it. The man laughed. It was not a nice laugh, and it was loud enough that the quartet, sensing something, played softer. Sweetheart, he said. Do you know whose house you're standing in? Yes, Anka said. I keep its books. That was when Oriane moved. She did it beautifully, Emmerich would think later, with a kind of surgical grace, crossing the floor, with her glass still in her hand, and arriving in the exact center of everyone's attention. She did not raise her voice. She did not have to. Let her past, Corin, she said, and the young man dropped his arm. And then Oriane turned to Anka and looked at her, the way a person looks at a chair that has been left in a doorway. You're the ledger woman. Yes, you shouldn't be up here. The service staff used the lower stair. A small pause, waited exactly right. And in 11 weeks there won't be a ledger room, so I'd start thinking about what else you know how to do. My father's people handle records. Properly. On systems. Nobody's writing in books like it's the last century. The hall was very quiet now. 200 people had discovered a fascinating interest in their own hands. Emmerich felt the thing rise in him, and he did not examine it, because he had not examined anything in a long time. What he felt was not protectiveness. He would have liked, afterward, to be able to say it was. What he felt was the flat, animal fury of a man watching another family put its hand on something, with his name on it, in his house, in front of his people, weeks before the ink went dry. And he crossed the floor with his glass in his hand, and he did the worst thing he had ever done in his life, without breaking stride. He put his hand on the back of Anka's chair, the empty one at the corner table where she must have set down her coat, and he said it loudly enough to carry to the windows. "Nobody touches what's mine." Somebody exhaled. Renard Calvert's eyebrows moved a fraction. "The books stay," Emmerich said. "The room stays. She stays." He looked at Oriane, and then, because the fury had teeth and wanted to bite something, he looked at Anka, and he said, "You're mine tonight. You don't leave this floor until I say, stand where I can see you." He heard it land. He heard, in the silence after it, exactly what he had said and exactly what it had made her into. In front of 200 people, in front of her own staff, in front of the men who counted crates for him and would now count something else entirely. Anka did not move for a moment. Then she looked at him, not up at him, though he was taller. Straight at him, the way she looked at a page with an error in it, and her face did not change at all, and that was worse than if she had slapped him. 11 years of standing in a concrete room, keeping his family out of prison, and this was the sentence he had chosen. "Yes, Mr. Helvane," she said. 200 people started talking at once, too brightly, and the quartet found its way back into the music, and Oriane's mouth was a thin, flat line as she turned away, and Renard Calvert said something jovial about young men and their tempers, and the night closed over the moment like water over a stone. Anka did not go back to the corridor. She did exactly as she was told. She walked to the corner table, set her clipboard down beside her folded coat, and stood there, with her hands at her sides, where he could see her for 1 hour and then a second hour, while he shook hands and accepted congratulations. He could not look at her. Every time his eyes went that way, something turned over in him, and he made himself look at other things instead. At the swan collapsing slowly into its silver tray, at Osric out on the terrace again, with the phone against his ear and the rain slanting past him, at Renard's people drifting toward the stairs that led down to the yards in ones and twos. At midnight, the hall began to empty. Emmerich stood by the windows with his back to the room, and watched the taillights of the first cars swing out through the gates, and he was thinking, with the small, cowardly part of a man that survives everything, that he would send her something. A raise. A letter. Something on paper that would let him not say it out loud. Mr. Helvane. She was behind him. She had her coat on. Up close. In the light from the window, he could see what the distance had hidden all evening. She was gray. Not pale. Gray. The way old paper is gray. And there was a fine, steady tremor in her jaw that she was working to hold still, and the split across her knuckles had opened again, freshly, sometime in the last 2 hours, and she had not so much as glanced at it. "You told me to stand where you could see me," Anka said. Her voice was perfectly level. "It's after midnight. I've stayed, Anka. I need you to take something from me." She reached into her coat, into the inside pocket, and her hand was shaking so badly that it took her 2 attempts. "I've been carrying it for 3 years. I was told to give it to you the day you stopped listening, and I've been arguing with myself about which day that was." She held it out. It was an envelope, plain, unopened and softened at the corners by 3 years of being carried. Across the front, in a hard slanted hand that Emeric had not seen since he was 19 years old, and standing at the foot of a hospital bed were 4 words, "For my son, alone." Emeric did not take it. He looked at the envelope in her shaking fingers and at the 4 words on the front, and his whole body simply declined to participate, the way a body declines a stare that isn't there. His father had been dead for 3 years. "Where did you get that?" "He gave it to me. My father is in the ground at Rushmere." "Yes," Anka said. "He gave it to me 11 days before he went there." The music had stopped. The quartet were packing their instruments with the briskness of people who want to be gone, and Emeric stood in his own house holding nothing, while a woman he paid to write in books held out the last thing his father had ever done. He took it. It weighed almost nothing. It had been carried so long that the paper had gone soft as cloth, and the flap had never been broken, and along one edge there was a faint shine where something, a thumb, had passed over the same half-inch of it several thousand times. "You didn't open it. It isn't addressed to me. 3 years. Yes, you have had this in your coat for 3 years, and you stood outside my office door with coffee and you never—" He stopped. His voice had gone somewhere. He did not authorize. "Why, tonight?" Anka's jaw did the small controlled thing again. "Because he told me to give it to you on the day you stopped listening. And you didn't stop tonight. You stopped a long time ago. I kept telling myself you'd start again." She looked at the window, at the rain, at anything else. "Tonight I stopped telling myself that." Emeric turned the envelope over and got his thumb under the flap. "Not here," she said. It was the first order she had ever given him. It landed with such quiet authority that his hands obeyed before his pride could object, and by the time the objection arrived, she had already added low and fast, "There are still 40 people on this floor, and 11 of them are his." He looked up. Across the emptying hall, Reynard Calvert was shaking hands at the head of the stairs, and 2 of his men had not gone with him. "Emeric," Oriane's voice, from the far end of the room, bright and carrying. "The cars are here. Give me a minute. You always want a minute." He waited until she turned away. Then he opened it anyway, because he was who he was, and inside there was a single folded sheet, and he read the first line by the light coming off the wet window. "If Anka has given you this, then I was right about you, and I am sorry for that." The handwriting was terrible. It was worse than he remembered. His father had written it with a hand that had already started to fail him, the letters slanting hard downhill, pressed so deep in places that the pen had gone through. Emeric read the second line, and then he read it again. And then something in his shoulders changed shape, and Anka, who had been watching his face for 3 years' worth of practice, said, "Not here, please." He put it inside his jacket, against his chest. "Go home," he said. His voice came out wrong. "Wherever that is. Take tomorrow. Take the week." "I'd rather work." That wasn't a request. "No," Anka said. "It rarely is." She bent to pick up her clipboard from the corner table, and there was a small pause in the middle of the bend, a hitch. The sort of thing a man notices only if he is already looking. And then she straightened with the clipboard against her forearm and said goodnight to him, and walked toward the service stair. Emeric stood where he was. Then he looked down at the floor beside the corner table, at the polished marble where she had stood for 2 hours with her hands at her sides because he had told her to stand where he could see her. There was a coin of dark liquid on the stone, about the size of a shirt button, and around it, a scatter of smaller ones, and around those, a faint dulling of the shine in a rough circle, the way a floor goes when something has been dripping onto it slowly for a long time, and drying between the drips. He caught her at the top of the service stair. He did not say her name. He got his hand around her upper arm, and she made a sound he had never heard from her, one short breath sucked in through the teeth, and her whole left side went rigid under his grip. "Take the coat off, Mr. Halvane. Take it off. There are people on the stairs. Then we'll go somewhere." "There aren't." He steered her through the nearest door, which turned out to be a linen room, shelves of folded cloth, and the hot dusty smell of a radiator that ran all year, and he shut it behind them, and put his back against it and said it a third time, and she did not move. "I'm going to be perfectly honest with you," Anka said. "If I take it off, I don't think I can get it back on, and I have 20 minutes of walking left tonight. Take it off." She undid the buttons. The coat was black wool, and it had hidden everything all evening, which was, he understood immediately, why she had worn it indoors, in front of 200 people, and let them all think she was too provincial to know better. Underneath, her shirt on the left side, from the ribs down to the waistband, was not the color it had started the night, as it had gone stiff. In places it had gone stiff twice, dried and soaked, and dried again, and there was a bulge under it where something had been packed and taped, and the tape had lifted at one corner. Under the lifted corner he could see what she had packed it with, not gauze. Gauze runs out. She had folded blotting paper from the ledger desk into a pad the size of a playing card, and changed it, by the look of the staining, perhaps 4 times a day for 3 days, and taped it down with the brown paper tape she used to repair broken spines. How long? 3 nights. 3. He had to stop. The bindery. There is a bindery. I do buy the books from it. Her voice stayed appallingly level. There was also a man at the north gate at 2 in the morning, with a bolt cutter and a hook, and I got the volume into the safe before he got to me, and then he put the hook through me, and I put the crowbar through his knee, and we both went home unhappy. Who was he? I didn't recognize him. A pause that was slightly too long. He recognized me. Emmerich had built his life on being the most frightening thing in any room. He discovered, standing in a linen closet at 1 in the morning, that he could be frightened, and that it did not feel like anything he had read about. It felt like the floor of an elevator dropping half an inch. Does it hurt? Yes. Say something else. It hurts a great deal, Annika said. And it has hurt a great deal since the night it happened, and I have been doing arithmetic about it, and the arithmetic says I have about 2 more days before it stops being my problem and starts being yours. Why didn't you tell me? I did tell you. I stood in your office on the Thursday, and I said there was a problem at the North Gate, and you said, she stopped and corrected herself. Precisely, because she was constitutionally incapable of overstating a case. You said, handle it. Which I did. You weren't wrong that I could. Annika. Don't. Her eyes came up. Don't do the voice. I have been managing this for 11 years, and if you start being kind to me now, I am going to fall over. And I would rather not do that in front of the linen. She fell over anyway. It happened without any drama at all. Her niece simply stopped participating, and she went down and sideways, and Emmerich got an arm around her before the shelving did, and then he was on the floor of a linen room with the ledger keeper of his family in his lap, and she weighed almost nothing, and her forehead against his jaw was so hot it felt like a mistake. Ilario, he said into the corridor. Not loudly. He did not need to say it loudly. His driver had been standing outside every door Emmerich had gone through for 9 years. Bring the car to the kitchen entrance, not the portico. And find Dr. Wren and tell her to stop drinking. Anka said something against his collar that might have been an objection. You've used up your opinions, Emmerich told her. He carried her down the service stair, past the racked trays and the steaming machines and 2 kitchen boys who had the sense to look at the wall, and out into the rain, and the cold hit her, and she surfaced enough to say, the letter. It's in my coat. There were 2 pages. Emmerich stopped walking. Rain came down between the buildings in long gray ropes, and behind them the customs house glowed like a lantern full of people who wanted things from him. When he gave it to me, I saw him fold it. Her eyes were closed. She was speaking from a long way underground, but the precision never left her, because the precision was not an effort for her. It was simply the shape she came in. 2 sheets. He folded 2 sheets together, and he sealed it in front of me, and he said, if he opens it and there is only one, then he has already been robbed. There was 1 sheet. Yes, then when? I don't know, it never left my coat. A long breath, It never left my coat, Emmerich. He took her left hand where it lay curled against her chest. The two fingers beside the split knuckles were the wrong shape, set slightly out of true and bound with a strip of linen with something rigid underneath. And when he turned it toward the light, he saw that the rigid thing was the barrel of one of her pens. She had splinted her own hand with the pen she wrote his books in. She had never once used his name. In 11 years, not once, not in a room alone, not in a hospital corridor, not on the night his father died when she had brought him a chair and a glass of water and stood in the doorway for 2 hours, saying nothing at all. He got her into the car. Then he stood in the rain, with his hand on the roof of it for a moment, looking down the long black slope of the yards, at the rails, going out under the sodium lights, at the low concrete hump of the weighbridge at the north end, with its one small, and he thought about a sealed envelope that had never left a coat pocket and had somehow lost half of itself. Anyway, there was only one place she took that coat off. Doctor first, Ilario said. Doctor, at the house. Wren's on her way there. Emmerich was already walking. Take her up. 2 men on the door of whatever room you put her in, and neither of them is one of Fenn's. Gladio, who had learned over the years to keep his questions until they had aged a little, said, "That's a strange thing to say, boss." "It is? You want me to leave you down here alone?" "Yes." "In the rain?" "Yes." He watched the car go, its tail lights smearing red across the wet, and then he turned and walked north into his own yards. The rain had settled into the steady industrial kind that does not fall so much as descend, filling the air, graying everything out past 40 feet. Emmerich went down the loading ramp and out along the number 4, siding with his collar up and his shoes going through standing water, and the sound of the customs house behind him thinned and vanished and was replaced by the sound of the cold houses. He had forgotten that sound. That was the honest thing he made himself admit as he walked. He had forgotten it because he had not walked out here at night. In 3 years, not since the funeral, not since the first month of running it, when he had come down here every night, at 2 in the morning, because he could not sleep and had needed to see the thing he had inherited actually working. It was working. It had gone on working without him looking at it. The compressors turned over on their long cycles, cold house 1, then 4, and then 7, out of step with one another the way they had been out of step since he was a boy, and the sodium lamps threw their sick orange over the rails, and steam came off the vents in slow flat sheets and lay along the ballast. 40 years of his family was frozen in these sheds. He knew the tonnage. He knew the insurance value to the nearest 1,000. He did not know, he realized, the name of a single man currently working the night shift in any of them, and he had known all of them once, when he was 19 and his father made him spend a winter unloading. The weighbridge sat at the north end, where the yard narrowed. It was a low concrete block with a flat roof and a steel door and one small window at ground level, high enough to see boots go past and nothing else. There was a light on inside. There was always a light on inside. He had seen that light from the window of his study, perhaps 9,000 times in his life, and had never once thought about who was under it. The steel door was open by 2 inches. Emmerich stopped in the rain about 15 feet short of it, and stood there with the water running off his jaw, and looked at that gap for a long moment, because Anka Sorrel had never left a door open in her life, and because somewhere in the last hour a great many things had begun making a different kind of sense. He pushed it with 2 fingers. Inside it was warm and dry, and smelled of paper and machine oil, and underneath, very faintly, of soup. The dehumidifier stood against the wall, silent, its plug lying on the floor beside the socket. Down the middle of the room ran the working table, with its lamp and its blotter, and its 2 pens laid parallel, on the left, floor to ceiling, the volumes. 11 years of them, spines out. Dated in that small even hand, in perfect order, the last 4 feet of shelf, still empty and waiting. On the right, against the wall, there was a cot. Emmerich looked at it for a long time. There was a folded blanket at one end, squared off like a soldier's, a tin plate and a cup upended on a cloth beside a single ring burner, a hook on the back of the door with a spare shirt on it, and beneath the cot, in a row, a pair of house shoes, a shoebox, and a hot water bottle. Above it, taped to the concrete at the exact height of a person lying down, there was a postcard of a beach somewhere with mountains behind it, gone soft and pale at the edges from years of being looked at. He crouched and slid the shoebox out from under the cot, and he had no right to it, and he opened it anyway. A passport, a bank book, and a stack of pay statements from the family office, 11 years of them, in order, not one of the envelopes opened. He turned the bank book over in his hands and did not look inside it, because he had already understood something, and he wanted, for 4 more seconds, not to. She lived here. He put his hand flat on the cold wall and stood with his head down and let that arrive. All of it, everything it meant. About 11 years, and about a raise. He had approved in a meeting and never asked her about. Everything it meant about the word he had used tonight in front of 200 people. Said about a woman who had been sleeping under his feet in a concrete box while he chose flowers. He had thought, walking down here, that he was coming to look for a piece of paper. Then he saw the floor safe. It was set into the concrete under the working table, and it was open, and the door of it hung on its hinge at the wrong angle because somebody had gone through the face of it with a core drill and made a neat gray ring of dust on the floor that the damp coming in through the prop door had already begun to spoil. Emmerich crouched. The safe was not empty. The current volume was there, and a bundle of manifests, and an envelope of cash, so small it embarrassed him. Nothing had been taken that a thief would take. He put the manifests inside his coat and left everything else where it lay. He stood up slowly. Then he stopped and turned his head and breathed in. Under the paper and the oil and the cold metal smell of the drilled steel, there was something else in the room, faint, sweetish, clinging the way it clings to wool. Pipe, tobacco, not cigarette. Pipe, and a particular one, cut with something like cherry. The smell of a man who had knelt in front of him in a hospital corridor when he was 11 years old and shown him how to knot a tie, because his mother was dying 2 floors down and somebody had to. Emmerich stood in the middle of the ledger room, with the rain ticking on the flat roof above him, and did not move for a very long time. Then he took out his phone and called the house, and when Ilario picked up, he said, "Is she awake?" "No, boss." "Then wake her." And Ilario, "Whatever Fen asks you tonight, the answer is that I went to bed." The house was quiet in the way houses are at 3 in the morning, which is not quiet at all, but full of small mechanical noises pretending to be silence. Emmerich sat on the stairs. He had not intended to. He had come in out of the rain, with the drill dust still on his knees, got 4 steps up toward the room where they had put her, and then his body had simply stopped and sat down, and he had read the whole of it there in the dark, with the wet still coming off his hair. It was not long. His father had never been a long man. "If Anka has given you this, then I was right about you, and I am sorry for that. I am sorry, because it means I built something that eats the people who hold it, and I handed it to my son anyway, and told myself he was hard enough to survive it. Someone in this house will sell it, not for money. Money is not what makes a man do that. It will be a man who believes he was owed something and was never given it, and he will be somebody you love, because those are the only people close enough to do it. I have written his name on the 2nd page. I have written it there and not here, because I want you to have to turn the page. I want you to stop for 1 second and decide whether you actually want to know, because if you do not want to know, then he has already won, and you should sell it all and go and be a decent man somewhere warm. The books are the proof. There is nothing else. Not a recording, not a witness, nothing a lawyer will like. Just 11 years of a woman writing things down in ink because I asked her to, and because she has never once in her life needed a reason beyond that. Look after her. I chose her for you before I chose her for me. You will not understand that sentence tonight. Ask her. He read it 4 times. After the fourth, the paper had gone strange in his hands, and he put it down on the stair beside him. I chose her for you before I chose her for me. Above him, along the landing, a door opened and closed softly, and Dr. Wren's shoes went along the carpet, and back again. Emmerich was still sitting there when the headlights came up the drive. He heard the car door, and the front door, and then heels on marble, and Orion Calvert came into the hall in the same wet slate gown, with a coat thrown over it and her hair coming down on one side, and she stopped when she saw him sitting on his own staircase in a soaked jacket like something dragged out of the yards. "You didn't answer," she said. "No. Half that room saw you carry the ledger woman out through the kitchens." Oriane put her handbag down on the hall table with great care, the way a person does when they are choosing not to throw it. "My father has been on the telephone since 2. He is being extremely calm about it, which you should understand is the worst available option. Sit down, Oriane. I would rather stand while you humiliate me." "I'm not going to humiliate you." He got up off the stairs. "I'm going to end it and tell you exactly why. And you can decide what to do with that." The hall was very large and very cold, and neither of them moved into the middle of it. "Say it properly," Oriane said. "Don't do it in the passive. I'm ending the engagement. Because of her. No." Emmerich looked at the woman he had been going to marry in 11 weeks, at her mother's rings on the wrong fingers, and he found, to his considerable surprise, that he did not hate her at all, because of me. "Because tonight I stood in a room full of people, and call the woman mine to make a point to your father, and she had been bleeding through her coat for 3 days while I did it, and she stood where I told her to stand for 2 hours without saying a word. And I did not notice, because I have not noticed anything in 3 years. You are ending a merger over manners. I'm ending it over the man I have become while it was being arranged." He said it flatly, without drama, which made it worse. "If I marry you in 11 weeks, I will be that man for the rest of my life, and I will be very good at it, and everyone will tell me I did well." Oriane was quiet for a moment. "You know what happens now," she said. "I have an idea." "No. You have an idea about my father." She picked her handbag back up. "You don't have an idea about what happens to me? I was the price, Emmerich. I have been the price since I was 19, and you have just handed me back across the table in front of 200 people, and he will not forgive that, and he will not take it out on you first," Emmerich said. "Then stay." She laughed. It was a real laugh, brief and awful. "You are 3 years too late to say a decent thing to me," Oriane said, and she walked to the door, and with her hand on it, she stopped and did not turn around. "Ask your uncle where he was in March. Not Fen the second, not Fen the loyal. Ask Osric. He was on my father's terrace in a garden chair with a pipe in his mouth, and I brought him a drink, and I have been telling myself for 5 months that it was nothing." Dr. Wren came down at 4:30, with her sleeves rolled and her forearms scrubbed pink to the elbow, and she sat on the second stair from the bottom, which no doctor had ever done in that house, and put her head back against the banister and closed her eyes. "She'll live," she said. "Ask me something harder." "How bad?" The hook went in under the ribs on the left and came out again, which is the only good news in this entire situation, because it means she isn't carrying it around inside her. Wren opened one eye. "It is 9 days old, not 3. She's been lying to you about a number of things, and the number of days is the smallest of them. It's infected, not the fast kind. The kind that sits in a person and eats what it can reach and waits for them to stop being able to work. She's been walking on that for 9 days. She's been walking on that and doing 12 hours a day in a concrete room and living on tinned soup and whatever fits in a cup." Wren sat forward. "Emmerich, I need you to hear the next part properly, because you have a habit of hearing the part you can pay for. Say it. That woman weighs less than she did the last time I stitched her, which was 2 winters ago, and less than the time before that, which was the summer your father died. Her teeth are going. Her nails are ridged. Her body has been running on nothing but instruction for years. She rubbed her face. She has a resting heart rate that belongs to a woman 20 years older, and a temperature I do not like at all. She has a scar on the left forearm I did not put there and cannot account for, and another across the back of the shoulder that was closed by somebody with no training and no light. And if the man with the hook had gone in an inch and a half higher, we would be having a very different conversation on this staircase. 2 winters ago, the crowbar business at the weighbridge. She came to my house at 4 in the morning, with her hand wrapped in a scarf and a bottle of gin as payment, which I did not accept, and she told me not to write it down anywhere the family office would see. Wren watched him. And the summer your father died, she came with 3 cracked ribs and told me she fell on the stairs. I have never once put her on a Halvane invoice because she asked me not to, and I let her have that. And I have thought about it, and I have thought about it perhaps 500 times since. Emmerich stood very still in his own hallway. Why? He said. Why would she ask you that? Because if you saw an invoice you'd ask what happened, and if you asked what happened you'd know she'd been standing between you and something. Wren stood up and picked up her bag. She would rather be invisible than be a cost. I've met 3 people like that in 30 years of this work, and 2 of them are dead. What does she need? Emmerich said. Food that did not come out of a tin. 6 weeks off her feet, which you will not get. Antibiotics, which I've started. Wren shouldered her bag. And somebody to tell her she is allowed to stop, which is not a prescription I can write, and is the only one that will actually work. She was halfway to the door when Emmerich said, Wren, how long has she been the only one? Dr. Wren considered him for a moment, with something in her face that was not quite pity. You'd have to ask her, she said. But your father used to send me down to the weighbridge with a flu shot every October. Every October. For 8 years. Personally, before he sent anyone to me, I always thought it was strange. The front door closed behind her. Emmerich went into the study and put the drill dust on his father's carpet, and did not care, and he took the shoebox out from under his arm and set it on the desk, and opened the bank book. There was money in it. There had always been money in it. 11 years of a salary he had approved in meetings, arriving on the 1st of every month with the punctuality of a machine, and going out again on the 2nd of every month, in 11 separate transfers. He sat down. He turned the pages. The transfers went back and back, past his own name on the account signatory line, past the change of bank in the year of the fire, past a page where the ink went from blue to black because someone had switched pens, and every single month for 11 years, the same 11 amounts went out to the same 11 accounts, none of them large, none of them the same size, all of them paid without fail on the 2nd. He knew what they were before he let himself know it. The night gate at Marrow Cross, the scale clerk at the Northern Interchange, a woman in the licensing office, a dispatcher, a man in the harbor police who had a boy at a school he could not afford. Every soft place in the family's operation, every pair of eyes that had ever quietly turned away from a Halvane crate, and none of them, not one, appearing anywhere in the family accounts, because the family accounts were audited and the family accounts could be subpoenaed, and the family accounts had, for 11 years, been clean. She had been running his father's informants out of her own wages. Emmerich put his elbows on the desk and his hands over his mouth, and sat in the dark of his study while the rain thinned outside and the first gray came up over the yards. And behind him on the stairs, Ilario coughed and said, Boss, what? 2 things, and you won't like either. Ilario came in. He had been up as long as Emmerich had, and looked worse for it. First, the yard cameras on the north end have been down since 11 o'clock. Not cut, serviced. There's a work order in the log with a signature on it. Who's yours? Emmerich took his hands away from his mouth. Second thing, Ilario said. Mr. Calvert's people didn't all leave? 3 of them are still down in Cold House 4, with a clipboard and a torch, and they've been in there an hour and 10 minutes, and when I asked them what they were doing they said they were counting. She was standing in the middle of the guest room when he came up, holding onto the bedpost with her good hand. Absolutely not, Emmerich said. You have Calvert's men in Cold House 4? How do you? Because I can hear a compressor cycle from anywhere in this building, and Cold House 4 has been running short for an hour, which means a door is being opened and closed. Anka let go of the bedpost, took one step, and put her hand back on it. They aren't counting crates. There's nothing in 4 worth counting. 4 is where the family put the things it didn't want to manifest for, and my father-in-law knows that because somebody told him, "You're what?" Sorry. A flicker of something that might, on a better night, have been humor. Your father-in-law. I've been proofreading the contract for 6 weeks. It gets into your mouth. Annika, where's my coat? Burned, I hope. There is a card in the lining, she said. Sewn into the lining, and on the card, in my own handwriting, are the 11 names, and if the wrong person finds it, 11 people who trusted your father get a visit. Emmerich went out into the corridor and came back with the coat. He watched her try to work the seam with 2 broken fingers, and after a moment, he took it out of her hands, not roughly, and turned the lining to the lamp and found the stitching, and opened it with his penknife and gave her the card without reading it. She looked at the card and then at him, and something in her face reorganized itself. You didn't read it, no, you've read everything else in that room tonight. Yes, Emmerich said. I have, and I'm going to be answering for that for a long time. Sit down before you fall down, please. She sat down. He noticed that she chose the hard chair by the window, rather than the bed, and he understood, in a way he would not have understood a day ago, that she was arranging herself so that if she needed to get up, she would not need help. I know what my father's letter said, he told her. The first page. He wrote that someone in the house would sell it, and that the name was on the second page, and that the books are the only proof there is. He put the folded sheet on the table between them. He also wrote that he chose you for me before he chose you for him, and that I wouldn't understand it tonight, and that I should ask you. Anka looked at the sheet for a long time without picking it up. I was 17, she said. Emmerich did not say anything. I was working the bond office at Marrow Cross, and I was very good at it, and a man there decided that, being very good at it, was a thing that needed correcting. She said it the way she said everything, evenly, as though reading a figure off a page. I ran. It was February. I got as far as your father's yards because there was steam coming off the vents, and I thought it would be warm, and I got into the space between Cold House 1 and Cold House 4, and I stayed there for 2 nights. And on the second night your father came out to look at a compressor at 1 in the morning, because he could not sleep either, and he found me. The rain had stopped. Emmerich could hear the first shunt of the day working somewhere down the line. He didn't call anyone, she said. He sat down on the ballast in a 200-pound coat and asked me what I wanted, not who I was. What I wanted, and I said, a door I can lock. Emmerich thought about a postcard taped to concrete at the exact height of a person lying down, a beach with mountains behind it. He had assumed, standing in that room, that it was somewhere she wanted to go. It occurred to him now that it might simply be the only picture she owned. She turned her hand over in her lap. He gave me the weighbridge. He gave me the books, and the steel door, and the key, and he never once asked me for anything, except that I write it all down, truthfully, and I have written it all down, truthfully, for 11 years. She looked up. And about a year before he died, he came down at 1 in the morning again, and he sat on my working table, and he said, I need you to do one more thing, and it is the only thing I have ever asked you for. He said, my son is going to be alone in this house, with people who love him, and that is the most dangerous room there is, and I need one person in it whose entire job is him and not the business, Annika. So no, Mr. Halvane, I am not your ledger clerk. Her voice did not rise. It never rose. I have been your post for 11 years. You have simply never been told. Emmerich found that he had sat down on the end of the bed at some point without deciding to. He wrote a second page, she said. I saw him fold 2 sheets. Whatever is on it, he wanted you to have to turn to it. It never left your coat. It never left my coat. Then think, Emmerich said, gently. Not tonight. Now. 11 years. One coat. When did it come off you? And out of your reach? Anka closed her eyes. He watched her do the thing. He had watched her do 1,000 times across a desk without ever once appreciating what it was. The small stillness, the very slight movement behind the closed lids. A woman turning pages that were not in the room. The funeral, she said. Go on. It rained. Everyone came back to the house, and I couldn't be in the house. So I went down to the room and I hung the coat on the door, because it was soaked. Her eyes opened. And somebody came down the stairs to sit with me, because he knew I'd be down there. Because he was the only one who ever knew where I was. He brought a chair. He sat with me for 2 hours, and he did not say very much, and I was grateful to him. I have been grateful to him for 3 years. The room was extremely quiet. Say his name, Emmerich said. You already know it. You smelled it tonight. And that is why you have not shouted at me once, since you came up those stairs. And that is why there are 2 men on this door who don't answer to him. Say it, anyway. Osric, Anka said. Emmerich stood up and went to the window. Behind him, he heard the chair. He turned. She was upright, hand flat on the table, already 3 steps toward the door, with her jaw set, and Emmerich crossed the room and got in front of her. I need the volumes out of that safe before they open it. Then tell me which ones, and I will send someone. You would send someone for the current one, because that is the one on top. There are 4 in that room that matter, and not one of them is on top. She tried to go around him and he moved, and she stopped, and for the first time in 11 years, they were standing close enough that he could feel the heat coming off her. Get out of my way, please. No, Emmerich. No. She hit him. Not hard, and not well, an open right hand against his chest, with almost nothing behind it, and then her legs went, and he caught her under the arms, and she was suddenly holding 2 fistfuls of his shirt, and shaking so badly he could hear her teeth. If I stop, I am 17, she said into his collar. Do you understand? If I am not the one who knows where everything is, then I am a girl in the gap between 2 sheds waiting for somebody else to decide about me. And I have spent 11 years making sure that is not true, and you are asking me to lie down. Emmerich held on to her. I am not asking you to lie down, he said. I am asking you to let me carry one thing, for 1 day. 1. I will give it back. It took her a long moment. 1, she said. Then, because she was who she was, she told him the 4, not the years which he would have got wrong. The bindings, green cloth, black, and the one with the water stain along the bottom edge from the summer the roof went. He got her back into the chair, and then he went to the window again, because he could not look at her while his hands were still shaking. The yards were coming out of the dark now, long, wet rails, and the steam lying flat, and down at Cold House 4, a torch beam moved across a doorway and went out. There's one more thing, she said behind him, and I would rather you were sitting. I'm not going to sit. The safe was drilled tonight, and nothing was taken. I know, I saw. Then you saw the manifests, Anka said. Bring them to me. He brought them. She spread them on the table with her right hand, one at a time, and she went very still. These are not mine. They're in your hand. They are in a very good copy of my hand. She turned one to the light. Look at the 10s. I close a 10. Whoever did this opens a 10 every time, because it is faster. And after 3 years of practice, you get lazy in exactly the places that are faster. She laid it beside a page from her own pocketbook, so that he could see the 2 together, and once he had seen it he could not stop seeing it, the small closed loop and the small open one, 3 years apart. These are forgeries of a theft that has not happened yet, signed by me. Sitting in my own safe, waiting for your father-in-law's auditors to walk into that room in 11 weeks, and find them. Emmerich said, very quietly, 9 days ago a man put a hook in you at the north gate. Yes, and nothing was taken then either. Anka looked up at him, and for the first time all night, something moved through the flat calm of her face that he could not name. No, she said. He wasn't there to take anything. He was there to make sure I wouldn't be walking around in 11 weeks to say the 10s were wrong. Dawn came up gray, and, without ceremony, Emmerich took 9 men down into the yards at 5:10, and none of them spoke, and none of them ran. He had told them the shape of it in the gun room in under a minute. Cold House 4 first, quietly, because there were 3 men in there with a torch and a clipboard, and there was going to be a great deal of noise afterward. Then the weighbridge, then Osra. Ilario had gone up to her room himself and made her say the 4 bindings twice, and had written them on the back of his hand, and had asked to take the weighbridge. Emmerich had said yes, without thinking about it for even 1 second, and he would carry that yes for the rest of his life, which is the way those things work. The cold houses at first light are their own country. You come in through the outer door into a chamber the size of a chapel where the air is 30 degrees colder than the yard, and so dry it takes the moisture off your eyes, and everything is white and rimed and stacked to the roof, and your breath does not steam, because there is nothing in the air for it to steam into. Sound behaves wrongly. Footsteps arrive before the feet do. Reinhard Calvert's 3 men were standing at the far end of aisle 6, with a torch propped on a crate and a clipboard between them, and one of them was blowing on his hands. And when Emmerich's people came out of the aisles on both sides of them, they did not reach for anything. They did not have anything to reach for. They were accountants in good coats who had been sent down at midnight to count crates that were not on any manifest, and they were extremely cold, and one of them had been crying for about an hour, which he tried to blame on the temperature. "Who sent you?" Emmerich said. "Mr. Calvert." "To count what?" The man looked at the clipboard, then at the floor, then at Emmerich, and made the calculation that men make when they realize they are the smallest thing in the building. He said, "There'd be 340 crates that don't exist," he said. He said to count them and photograph the seals, and if the number came out right, then the room under the weighbridge was real, and everything else he'd been told was real too. Emmerich felt the whole thing turn over and show him its underside. Everything else he'd been told. "By your uncle, sir." That was when the radio on Ilario's channel went, and stayed on, and nobody spoke into it. Emmerich ran. He came out of the cold house, into the gray, and the ordinary damp air hit him like a hand, and he ran north along the number 4, siding with his heart going, and his men strung out behind him, 400 yards of wet ballast that took a year, throwing its yellow light out onto the stones. Ilario was sitting against the outside wall with his legs straight out in front of him. He had the 4 volumes in his lap. He had them stacked in order and both arms across them, the way a man holds something in a crowd, and he had got them out, and had not made it to the corner of the building, and there was a great deal of blood on the concrete, and when Emmerich went down on his knees in it, Ilario opened his eyes and looked mildly annoyed. 4, he said. "You said 4. Ilario." He went that way, a very small movement of the chin, north toward the perimeter gate, walking. He wasn't even walking fast. "Boss Ren's at the house. We're 2 minutes from. Take the books." Ilario. "Take the books," Ilario said, "because if I let go of them for you and then you leave them on the ground, I am going to be extremely—" And then he stopped, and his hands did not stop. They stayed exactly where they were across the covers. He was 34. He had driven Emmerich for 9 years. He had 2 sisters in a town 4 hours north and a standing bet with the kitchen staff about the outcome of a wedding that was no longer going to happen. Emmerich knelt in the wet with the 4 volumes in his arms for as long as he could permit himself, which was 11 seconds. Then he stood up and handed them to the man nearest him and said, "If those get damp, I will know," and started walking north. Osric Fen was not hard to find. Osric Fenn had never in his life expected to have to be hard to find. He was 200 yards along the perimeter road, going toward the north gate at the pace of a heavy man with a bad knee, with a canvas bag in one hand and his coat collar turned up against the wet. He heard them coming. He did not run. 7. He stopped in the middle of the road, under the last sodium lamp, and turned around and set the bag down by his foot. And when Emmerich came up out of the gray, he did the most terrible thing available to him, which was to smile. "Well," Osric said, "that was quicker than I'd allowed for." Emmerich hit him. It was not a professional thing. It was the flat, open swing of a man who has been holding a dead friend, and it took Osric off his feet and put him down on the wet road, and Emmerich stood over him, breathing hard while his men stopped 10 yards back and looked at the rails. "Ilario," Emmerich said. "I didn't want that." Osric got himself up on one elbow. There was blood in his mouth, and he spat it out, and it did not seem to concern him. "Believe that or don't. I said take the books." The lad wouldn't let go of them. Nobody thought he'd had. He stopped, and something almost genuine came across his broad face. He was a good boy. "Say why, Emmerich." "Say it out loud in the road," Emmerich said. "Because I have been asking myself since 1 o'clock this morning what a man is owed that's worth this, and I cannot find it, and I would like you to tell me." Osric sat up properly, on the wet road. 31 years, he said. "I was your father's second for 31 years. I did the parts of it he would not do. I carried 3 men out of the interchange fire, and I sat with your mother when she was dying, because he could not stand to. And when the time came when he was in that bed and everybody was making arrangements, do you know what he left me?" "Say it." "A pension and the pipe." Osric laughed wetly. "A pension. And the house went to a boy of 29, who had never once come down to the yards at night, and the books went to a woman who came out from between 2 sheds with no name on her, and I was to be a pension." He wiped his mouth. "Calvert asked me what I wanted. Nobody had asked me that in 31 years. I found I had an answer ready." "You were in Larne," Emmerich said. Osric stopped. "The week we buried him. You told me you had gone to Larne because you could not stand the house." Emmerich's voice did not rise. He had discovered that he did not need it to. "You were not in Larne. It rained and everyone came back to the house, and you went down the Weybridge stairs with a chair, and you sat with the one person in this family who was too decent to think about why her coat was on the door. It was the only 2 hours in 11 years that it was not on her." Osric said nothing at all. "You took a page out of a dead man's letter," Emmerich said, "and then you spent 3 years teaching yourself her handwriting, and you got the tens wrong. The tens. She closes them. You open them." She saw it in 4 seconds. He crouched down so that they were level, and the canvas bag was between them on the road. "You have been in that room 100 times in 3 years, Osric, and you never once looked at what she was actually doing. That's the whole of it. That's the entire thing. Everybody in this family walked past that door for 11 years, and none of you ever looked in, and my father knew you wouldn't, and that is why he put the only proof there is behind it. She's a clerk." "She wrote you down," Emmerich said. "Every payment you ever took, in ink, in order, in a bound book, for 11 years. You have been finished since before you started. It only took me until this morning to read it." He picked up the canvas bag. Inside there were 3 of Anka's early volumes, which Osric had evidently taken to be the important ones, and which covered nothing but 4 years of scale weights and inspection fees, and a bank draft, and a passport that was not his, and a single sheet of paper folded in 4 and gone soft at the creases from 3 years of being carried in a coat. Emmerich looked at it for a long moment. He did not open it there. "I'd have kept you alive," Osric said from the road. "That was in it. That was always in it. Calvert wanted you gone at the wedding and I told him. No, I said the boy walks away from it with the house on the hill and his name and he never knows, and he agreed. And that is God's truth, Emmerich. I never once." You put a hook in her. Osric's mouth closed. 9 days ago, at the North Gate, Emmerich said. Because she was going to be in that room, in 11 weeks when the auditors came, and she was going to say the tens were wrong, and there is no version of your arrangement that survives her being alive and paying attention. He straightened up. You were always going to have to do that part. You knew it when you took the page. You have known it for 3 years, and you sat at my table at Christmas. The sodium lamp above them clicked and went out, the way they do when the light comes up. Emmerich, Osric said, son, don't. Emmerich turned and walked away up the perimeter road toward the gray shape of the cold houses, and he lifted one hand as he went, and behind him his men closed in around the shape of a heavy old man sitting in a wet road. He did not look back. He did not hear anything, either, because the compressors chose that moment to come round onto their long cycle. Cold House 1, then 4, then 7, out of step, the way they had been out of step since he was a boy. And by the time they had finished, he was 200 yards away, with a folded sheet of paper in his hand and the reins starting again on the back of his neck. Renard Calvert telephoned at 9. Emmerich took the call standing at the window of his study, with his sleeves rolled and his knuckles split, and 11 years of bound volumes stacked on the desk behind him in the wrong order, because the man who knew the right order was asleep upstairs with a drip in her arm. I have 3 men who did not come home, Renard said. You have 3 men in my kitchen eating eggs and shaking, and a car is bringing them to you at 10. They can tell you themselves that nobody touched them. They can also tell you what they counted. A pause. 340, Renard said. 341. Your man dropped a decimal and I would not employ him. Emmerich closed his eyes briefly. You were told about that room by my uncle, who has spent 5 months explaining to you how to take this family apart, and who intended to hand you the wedding, my sightings, my cold houses, and my life in 11 weeks. I want you to understand that I know precisely how much of that you agreed to. Emmerich, I am not going to ask you which parts. It would only make me want to do something about it. He opened his eyes. So here is the entire arrangement, Renard, and it does not have a second draft. The engagement is finished. Your daughter is not to be punished for it. If I hear that she has been, in any way, socially or financially, or in any other way you'd like to be clever about, then everything my uncle sold you becomes something I sell to somebody else, and I have 11 years of bound volumes and a woman who can read them out loud in a courtroom. You are threatening me with paperwork. I am threatening you with the truth, Emmerich said. In order, in ink, with dates. Ask my uncle how it worked out for him. There was a silence on the line that went on for some time. He came to me, Renard said at last. His voice had changed. Old men's voices do, when the shape of a thing they have been carrying turns out to be different from what they thought. That is the only defense I have. He came to me. I did not go looking. I know. Was there a man of yours? His name was Ilario. Prima, Emmerich said. He was 34. He has 2 sisters in Varney and I am going to go and see them this afternoon, and I am going to have to invent something to tell them. And I want you to know his name because you were part of the arrangement that got him killed, and I do not intend to be the only person who has to carry it. He hung up before Renard Calvert could find anything to say. Oriane's letter came in the afternoon, brought by hand, 3 lines long. She did not thank him, and she did not forgive him. She wrote that her father had not so much as looked at her since Thursday, that she was going to her mother's people in the South for a while, and that she had thought about it and decided he had been right to ask her to stay and wrong to think she could. At the bottom she had written, without any punctuation around it, "Tell the ledger woman, I am sorry." Emmerich put it in the desk drawer. Anka woke at 4 in the afternoon with the light coming in low and orange across the counterpane, and found him sitting in the chair by the window, with the second page in his hands, unread. You waited, she said. He wrote it, for both of us. He just didn't know that when he wrote it. She pushed herself up on the pillows. There was color in her face for the first time in a week, the smallest amount. The way a fire looks when it has only just caught. Read it, Annika said. So he did, out loud, in the ordinary voice a man uses to read a letter, with the compressors going on outside in the yards. His name is Osric. I hope by the time you have turned this page, you have already known it for an hour, and I hope you did not have to be told. Twice. Now, the other thing. On the day you marry, or on the day you turn 35, whichever is first, 1/3 of the house passes to Annika Sorrel outright, and her name goes on the door with ours. I have had it drawn and signed, and it sits with Calendar, who has instructions to do nothing whatsoever with it until you walk in and ask him for it by name. If you never ask, it never happens, and she gets a pension and a concrete room, and I will have failed her twice. So ask him. That is the whole of the trap. I am not doing this because she is owed it, although she is. I am doing it because in 30 years, I have met exactly one person who could hold this family in her 2 hands and never once want it, and a thing like that should not be sitting on a cot under a weighbridge while my son picks out flowers. Emmerich stopped reading. There's one more line, he said. Read it. Tell her the tea in the yellow tin is hers. She thinks I never noticed her taking it. I bought it for her for 6 years. Annika Sorrel, who had been stabbed with a cargo hook and had splinted her own hand with a fountain pen and had stood for 2 hours bleeding onto marble, without changing her expression, put both hands over her face and made no sound at all. Emmerich put the page down on the bed and did not touch her because he had learned 1 or 2 things in the last 14 hours, and he sat with his forearms on his knees and looked at the floor and let her have it. It took a while. He was so unbelievably rude about that tea, she said eventually from behind her hands. He was rude about everything. He used to stand in the doorway and say, "That tin is very light again. That's the man." She wiped her face with the heel of her good hand and looked at him, and her eyes were red and furious about being red, and Emmerich felt something in his chest that he had spent the whole of his adult life successfully not feeling. "I don't want 1/3 of the house," she said. "I know. I want the room. It's yours. The room, the door, the key, and a new safe that hasn't got a hole in it." He looked up. "And the shelving is going in this week because you're 4 feet from running out, and I have been paying for 4 decades of cold storage while the only thing in this family worth insuring sat on a plank. There are 11 names on a card in your coat lining," he went on, "and from the 1st of next month, they come out of the house accounts through a company that does not have our name on it, and you get 11 years of your own wages back. And before you argue with me, standing up, in a room with your bank book open in front of me, and it is the only decision I have made in 3 years that I am certain about." Anka opened her mouth and then closed it. "You've been buying my father's eyes out of your own pocket since you were 17 years old," Emmerich said. "You never once put it on a piece of paper where I would see it. Why? Because you would have made it a line item," she said. "And line items get audited, and audited things get subpoenaed, and 11 people who trusted your father would have been in a witness box." She said it perfectly evenly, and then she ruined it entirely by adding, in a much smaller voice, "And because you would have thought I was expensive." Emmerich crossed to the window and stood there for a moment with his hands on the sill. Down in the yards the hose crew had finished and gone in. The rails ran out flat and shining under a sky that had finally decided to stop, and in Cold House 4341 crates that did not exist sat at exactly the temperature they had sat at for 40 years. Keep it cold. Keep it moving. Do not let anything thaw. He had been raised on that sentence. He had run a business on it and very nearly run a life on it, and he stood at the window of his father's study and thought, with the particular clarity that arrives at the end of the worst day of a man's life, that it was an excellent instruction for meat and a catastrophic one for everything else. "I said something to you last night," he said, without turning round. "You said a number of things. I said you were mine." Anka did not answer that. He had not expected her to. She had been keeping the accounts of this family for 11 years, and she knew better than anyone what a debt looked like when it was written down. "I want to correct the entry," Emmerich said. He turned around. She was watching him from the pillows with her chin up, which was how she had looked at him across the corner table with 200 people listening, which was how she had looked at a man with a crowbar on the Weybridge stairs, which was, he suspected, how she had looked at his father from between two sheds in February, when she was 17 years old and had asked for a door she could lock. "It runs the other way," he said. "I'm yours. I have been for about 11 years, and I was the last person in this house to find out, which is exactly the sort of thing that happens to a man who stops reading past the first line." The room was very quiet. "That's a large entry," Anka said, "to make in ink. Then don't put it in the book yet." Emmerich came and sat on the edge of the bed, close but not touching, and he set the yellow tin on the counterpane between them, which he had gone and found at 6 o'clock that morning, in the back of a cupboard that had not been opened in 3 years. "Put it in the blotter. Give it a month. If it's wrong, I'll cross it out myself, and I'll never mention it again, and you'll still have the room and the key, and every penny of it, and that is not conditional on a single thing." Anka looked at the tin. Then she reached out with her right hand, the good one, and closed it around his wrist, and did not let go. "There's a postcard in my room," she said, "under the Weybridge. I saw it. It came in a box of bindery samples 11 years ago, and I kept it because it was the only picture I had, and I have looked at it every night for 11 years, and I have never once wanted to go there." Her thumb moved, very slightly, against the inside of his wrist. "I want you to know that I wasn't waiting to leave. I was just looking at something that wasn't concrete." Emmerich turned his hand over and let her hold it properly. "We'll get you a window," he said. Emmerich Halvain did not lose an empire that night. He lost the version of himself that could stand in a room full of people and call a woman his in front of 200 witnesses. And the woman he said it to was the only person in the building who had ever actually been on his side. That is what makes this one land. She never asked him for anything. She never cried, never begged, never once let him see the cost, and she still handed him the envelope that saved his life. If you love a slow burn where the quiet one turns out to be holding the whole family together, and a man who has to become worth her before he is allowed anywhere near her, then you are in exactly the right place. Hit that like button, subscribe for more grounded mafia romance, and share this with somebody who needs it today. Tell me in the comments what the moment was for you. Was it the blotting paper? Was it the pen? Was it the yellow tin? I will see you in the next one.